In the name of God. I wish I had listened to my mother's advice, but the past is the past, and I must move forward.
It was winter. Some animals had gone into hibernation, hiding in caves or burrows. The air was freezing, and the water in roadside puddles had turned to ice. A woman sat on a chair, looking weak and pale. It seemed she had not been able to get proper nutrition or enough calories to stay healthy. Next to her were several bags of groceries from the store. Her pale face was filled with sadness, and the struggles of daily life had made her look older than her real age. Despite the cold, she remained seated, lost in deep thought. I wish I had listened to my mother's advice when I was 17. I wish I had continued my education like my classmate Susan. But back then, her biggest weakness was trusting people too easily. Because of this, others considered her foolish. One day, this same weakness led to a terrible mistake. She believed she was in love with a boy and did something she should have waited until marriage for. The boy had promised her a bright future, using sweet words to fool her. But once he got what he wanted, he disappeared from school. His only ambition was to satisfy his own desires, and he had used her for his own pleasure. Her unrealistic dreams had ruined her, turning her into a woman with no clear path in life. When her family, especially her mother, discovered the truth, they wanted to have the boy arrested for taking advantage of her. But no one knew where he lived. He had moved months earlier and vanished. Now, she was left alone, carrying a child. According to the date on her calendar, the baby would be born in 3 months. She looked at her reflection in the mirror. Her family was not rich enough to support a baby. When she first learned she was pregnant, she thought about ending the pregnancy, but the doctor forbade her, warning that it could put her own life at risk. With no other option, she took a temporary job as a cashier in a store. Over the years, she managed to save enough money to buy a small cabin, which became her home. Now, she had to take care of herself and her child. The loud siren of an ambulance pulled her back to reality. She looked down at her ankle, which had turned blue from the cold. A part of her wanted to stay there and let the cold take over. That day, someone had passed by her flank at the store and recognized her. It was Susan, the friend with whom she had once dreamed of joining the Air Force. Years ago, when they were still in school, they had set a deadline to apply as Air Force cadets and become fighter pilots. They had dreamed of being part of an elite squadron known as the Angels of Wrath. Susan had achieved that goal. But she? She was just a cashier, working a temporary job that she had to constantly renew, struggling to survive and raising a child alone in poverty. With impatience, she forced herself to stand, though her body resisted. She needed to haul her grocery bags back to her cabin, move forward, and try to forget. But no matter how hard she tried, the forbidden memories returned like a haunting nightmare. It felt as if she was trapped between two heavy forces: her mistake of ignoring her mother's advice and the deceitful words of the boy who had fooled her. Taking a deep breath, she steadied herself, waiting for the numbness in her legs to go away. A thought crossed her mind: joining the Air Force was still possible until the age of 30. Maybe she couldn't be a pilot, but she could apply for a maintenance and support role. Maybe there was still hope. She refused to let hardship impair her spirit. Hope didn't mean being an optimist in a childish way. It meant learning from failures and moving forward. And maybe, with determination and her family's support, she could still rebuild her life.
Like and subscribe if you would like.